I'm Mirror Fatheree.
This is Mirror Dave.
And this is Tex-Trek. So welcome back to the Tex-Trek podcast and our 44th installment. As you can see, the Mirror Universe is still in control here. And speaking of our universe, we will be sharing with you today an interview with the Star Trek comic book artist J.K. Woodward. He recently did the art on the Star Trek The Next Generation Mirror Broken miniseries set in the Mirror Universe.
J.K. Woodward has mighty facial hair. He's practically Mirror Universe material.
Absolutely. We totally need to take him back to our universe. He will do very well there. But in this interview, it is being performed by the Prime Universe Fatheree instead of myself. So you may notice that he's asking some silly questions because this was also recorded a few months ago. He did this on the Star Trek cruise, and he apologizes for the audio quality.
We'll torture him.
But we're definitely torturing him in the agony booth right now to make him pay for that.
The content is still good.
The content is absolutely fantastic, so please stick around and check it out. Here we go. Hey y'all, this is Fatheree Prime. I just wanted to thank you for checking out this interview I did with J.K. Woodward back in January on the Star Trek cruise. One of the things that comes up during the discussion we have here is the late, great Harlan Ellison. Now, this interview was recorded before we recently lost Harlan, and I encourage y'all to stick around and get to that part, because J.K. Woodward has some really interesting stories about getting to know Harlan Ellison. And I just wanted to say that this was kind of a surprise when I ran into Woodward on board the ship, and he agreed to an interview then and there on the spot. So the audio isn't great. I know it sounds a little rough in the beginning. We are actually not that far away from where some karaoke was going on, of all things. And the audio gets better if you just stick around, and after the first few minutes, the karaoke does stop, I promise. So please check out the entire interview. There's some really cool stuff in here, and enjoy. I'm Fatheree.
And I'm J.K. Woodward.
And this is Tex-Trek. So, very special moment in Tex-Trek history. I'm actually sitting with an artist who has worked on multiple Star Trek comics, and we're on board the Star Trek cruise right now. So,
It's amazing.
Yeah, what's the coolest thing about being on the ship so far?
Oh, well, this is my first, not just my first Star Trek cruise, but my first cruise ever.
Me too.
And I grew up in New England, and I grew up on Cape Cod and Buzzards Bay, and I've been on boats before, but it's always little boats, so it's kind of weird to be on a floating hotel, you know. But the coolest thing is going to my room and looking out the balcony and watching the water, to be honest. But apart from that, from the Star Trek angle, the coolest thing was getting on this boat with all these actors that I idolize. You know, and just because we came in, I came in with them. So while you guys were waiting those big old lines, they were shuffling
like a big deal. You're like a superstar.
And I walked by and I saw everybody look in the window, going, "Oh look, that's Odo," you know, and I could see them all looking at everybody. And me and
Riker.
And I turned to my wife and I go, they're looking at us and going, "Who the hell are they?"
That's what I said. Yeah. But if you would just, we'll get into what you've worked on in a second. If you could tell us, how did you get into Star Trek, and what is your favorite part about it?
Well, I got into Star Trek when I was a kid because it was in syndication, the original series, back in the 70s, and I used to eat it up. And I think what dragged me into it superficially was Spock. Oh my God, he looks cool. He looks demonic with his eyebrows and his ears. And then I started watching the show, and I got sucked into the stories. As a 6-year-old, I didn't really understand all the nuance of what was happening there. But the phasers were cool, the spaceships were cool. This was pre-Star Wars, so we hadn't seen much of the special effects. So to me, these special effects were great.
Yeah, bleeding edge.
Yeah. And then I would watch them over and over again because it was in syndication, so you'd see the same episodes over and over again. And as a kid, you never get tired of it. You just keep watching it. And I started realizing stuff. Oh, Spock doesn't have emotions. What's that about? And I started asking questions, and the more I asked questions, the more I learned about it. The more I was like, "There's much more to this." And then I got into comic books around 11 or 12. I mean, I was into it all the time, but I got into it as in going to conventions at the time. And the comic conventions at the time, it wasn't the big San Diego Comic Cons. It was Creation Cons. And the Creation Cons were Star Trek and comics at once back in the day, before it became the Star Trek vehicle it is now. So while I was like wanting to meet John Byrne and wanting to see these X-Men people, and I was learning more about Star Trek from people that are even more obsessed with it than me. And then, so there was a brief period I wasn't into Trek between like maybe 9 and 12, and I got kind of sucked back into it at a deeper level because I was old enough to kind of understand some of the things we're saying. But what I liked about it, what kept me on board, was the optimism. You know,
right on.
I like the idea of a place where you could have. I mean, it was Starship Earth. The bridge was you had a diversity there, and I mean you had a Russian guy, and you know this was
during the height of the Cold War.
Yeah, this was the Reagan administration, and they're like, yeah, this Russian guy's cool, you know, and what? And then the movies started happening. I remember in I think it was '79, the motion picture came out.
Yes, sir.
And I had gotten some word of that, and it just every time something new happened, it would just light that fire again. And then I was in high school. I was a senior in high school, I think, when
Next Generation
started. Yeah, and I saw.
And
I saw the commercial. I was actually at a keg party at somebody's house, and the TV was running and the music was playing, and I made them shut off the music because I was like, I saw the promo for Next Generation, and there was a Klingon on the bridge. There's a Klingon on the bridge. Now we're getting along with Klingons. You know, how much more Roddenberry do you get than that? And then that was actually touched by, I remember there was an original series episode, and I think it was Day of the Dove? Or, no, it wasn't Day, what was the one with the core?
That was Errand of Mercy.
Errand of Mercy? Was that the one where they ended with "One day we'll be allies"?
Yeah, with the Organians in season 1.
Yes.
Yeah. The first Klingon episode.
And that was the fruition of that. I was seeing it, years later, and it's going to be a new TV series, and it felt like there was a continuity to it that made me very excited. And that's the kind of thing that kept me going. The world of Star Trek, it was a real world. It was all connected. It was all positive. It was all kind of a good message. There's still conflict, to be sure, but it was all positive.
Do you have any favorite episodes or favorite characters?
And maybe this is even cliche to say because a lot of people say this, but the breakout characters are my favorite. The characters that don't quite fit in, the fish out of water, like Spock was, like I mentioned.
Or Worf.
Worf in this one.
Odo.
Worf was actually the new Spock, and everybody said Data was because they were going for the emotionally stoic thing. But Data actually wanted to have emotions.
Right. Worf is the guy who is torn between two worlds.
He was raised by humans, yet he was a Klingon.
Yeah.
And he was much more comparable to Spock in my mind.
Absolutely.
And he was actually emotionally stoic like a Vulcan, because he was so afraid. And they actually explained this later in Deep Space Nine, but it's something I understood from the beginning. That Michael Dorn said when he tried out for the part, I read an interview, that he went a different direction. He tried to play it all kind of stoic and subdued, because he felt that a Klingon among humans would feel self-conscious about expressing himself as a Klingon. And so he played it a little differently, and he got the part, so Gene Roddenberry obviously agreed with that. And then in the show, in Deep Space Nine, he actually was telling the story to Jadzia Dax, which explained why, because he hurt some kid playing soccer because of that Klingon zeal.
Spoiler alert for Deep Space Nine.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good.
It's a 25-year-old show, guys. But I always saw him as that character, like and I think a lot of people can relate to this. You can't express yourself the way you want to all the time. Sometimes you got to hold part of yourself back to be appropriate. Yeah. In the workplace. I struggle with that. Yeah, I know. I mean, there are places where they make you keep your pants on. I don't know. It's appropriate behavior. But no, Worf was really struggling with that. He was struggling with, here's my nature as a Klingon, but here's my nurture, raised by Russian Jews in, I guess it was Russian, right? He was raised in... Yeah. His parents were the sweetest people ever. But he was raised as a human, but they were trying to respect his heritage when he became of age and wanted to learn more about it. So here's a guy in total conflict, cultural conflict. And now he's an officer. And an officer is held to a higher standard of conduct anyways. Plus, they're humans. He just wanted he wanted to laugh, and he wanted to shout, and he wanted to be more expressive like Klingons are, but he couldn't do it because they'd be, you're weird. So I always liked him for that.
Yeah, and I love that bit in Deep Space Nine where they try to explain that, because Jadzia brings up a good point, saying, you're different from most Klingons. You don't laugh, you don't throw things around.
Yeah, why are you such a fuddy-duddy?
Yeah.
And then after he told that story, things changed for them.
Yeah.
She kind of understood him more.
And that was you talked earlier about having like a sense of continuity throughout the multiple shows.
Yeah.
I mean, that was something that really added a layer of continuity going back to all the previous years on the Next Generation. And
well, it kind of explained
why sexual
for
frustrations, where he says he couldn't have sex with human women. Like,
I get why he could take it.
Yeah, like he was scared he would hurt them.
Yeah. And Riker's line was about to say, most people I would accuse of bragging.
yeah, I believe you.
Yeah, he had that. He was always kind of a social misfit because of his Klingon heritage and because of what he wanted to let out and he had to hold in. I remember a conversation with Guinan where he said, Klingons do not laugh. Yes, they do.
Yeah, that's not true. I know plenty of Klingons who laugh.
But he was talking about himself. He was saying he was telling himself Klingons don't laugh, so he wouldn't feel. I mean, you got to figure he's feeling kind of culturally conflicted, and he's just telling himself Klingons don't laugh, so he doesn't feel like a traitor to where he's from, which is obviously very important to him. Being raised on Earth, he wants to learn more about Klingon culture. He wants to be. I always describe Worf as more Klingon than a Klingon because he's trying so hard to be a Klingon, but he was raised by humans and he's in the human world. And he holds the standards of what it means to be a Klingon higher than any Klingon he ever met. Because they all talk about honor, but in Next Generation, very few Klingons were actually honorable.
Yeah, and they really touch on that in Sins of the Father.
Sins of the Father,
Season 3, when he's like, no, I'll take the blame.
Yep.
And you can say that my family was the dishonorable one. If we tell the truth and blame it on Duras, it'll hurt the Empire.
You know what that reminded
I'll
me
take
of?
it.
That reminded me of. I felt like if you see a lot of Christians out there acting hateful, which is the opposite of what Christ preached, right? And then you have like Worf is like the Christian that's actually trying to be Christian. You know what I mean? And saying, this is the wrong path. This is what we should do. That's kind of what I felt like that was a metaphor for. Like Worf was actually following the way Klingons are supposed to be, but is not socially acceptable among Klingons on their own because he was raised away from them. So he believed in all these ideals and kind of followed
more
to a
genuine
degree.
conviction.
Exactly. Yeah.
But moving on to what you've done professionally with Star Trek, you want to tell us about how you got into working in comics?
It's something I wanted to do since I told you when I was 12 years old I started getting serious in comics and going to conventions. I idolized John Byrne. I loved the X-Men stuff he was doing, and then we went on to Fantastic Four.
And Star Trek stuff.
And that's what he's doing now. But we'll get to that because I love the stuff. I love the Romulan stories he did. But I mean, he was somebody I idolized, and I wanted to do more. I was kind of following in his footsteps, and then I discovered Bill Sienkiewicz, and that's what kind of got me into painting. Like, oh, you can paint comics. You don't have to just pen and ink them. And then I started getting into more of the serious art world, and I was living in Los Angeles at the time when I was in my 20s. I started doing North Hollywood showings, just like small local showings of paintings and stuff. And it brought me to Germany because I got the attention of a German record producer, just a small label, and I lived there for 2 years doing that kind of stuff. And then one of the...
like album covers?
Album covers,
okay.
Yeah. So we were doing this one concept album cover, and I did, I think it was like Flesh Angels or something, and I did this kind of weird saddle-stitched, almost comic book of paintings. And some people saw that, and they were like, well, people trying to break in with scripts like, you want to do something like that with us? And so I did a couple of 12-page stories for an anthology and caught the attention of IDW, and they hired me to do, I think the first book I did was with IDW for money, and it was called CSI New York. It was a licensed book. It was a 4-issue miniseries.
Like every other IDW comic.
Yeah, well, at the time
Pretty
especially. But
a lot of them are pretty good, though.
What happened after that is I was on issue 3 of that, of a 4-part miniseries, and I hadn't quit my day job, so I was working crazy hours trying to keep both jobs. Peter David had seen my work, and he had just finished something at DC Comics called Fallen Angel. And he, I guess, maintained the rights to it and brought it over to IDW, and DC canceled it. And he needed an artist, and they got me to do it. And for 3 years, I worked on an ongoing series with Peter David.
Peter David being another comic book professional who's worked on Star Trek projects.
Yeah. So when that ended, well, it didn't end. The series ended as a series, and then we were going to do miniseries, kind of a Hellboy model, where we do one miniseries every year, so 4 or 5 issues. In between, I was like, I need work, and I've always been a big Star Trek fan, so I kind of pushed and pushed and pushed, and I started doing single issue stuff like Captain's Log. They had a series in like 2006 called Captain's Log, where they had a different captain, and they were telling the stories in first person. So they had a Jellicoe one, they had a Pike one. I did both of those. They also had a book called Alien Spotlights, also one-shots. I did a Klingon one with Keith Candido, who wrote the script. He's a big Star Trek novelist mostly, but he does comics sometimes. And then I worked up from that, and slowly I became kind of the Star Trek guy, and I asked, what's next? And one day they said, I was also always asking for Doctor Who work, because they just got the license for that.
I'm on a Star Trek cruise wearing a Doctor Who shirt. So.
Sacrilege!
Yeah.
No, actually, they both kind of work together pretty well.
Yeah, really well.
What actually happened is we did a crossover with Doctor Who and Star Trek Next Generation. And when I got the job, I was like, I didn't believe it. It was an 8-issue miniseries. I've been asking for Doctor Who work or Star Trek work, and they said, we got both.
And so was that a story that the Tiptons came up with?
It was, no, I think that started with editorial, because they'd wanted to do this for a while. And then there was a brainstorm between the Tiptons, editorial at IDW. I think Tony Lee was involved because he was doing some of the Doctor Who stuff.
The Tiptons, we should say, are the writers of the...
right.
What was it called? Star Trek Next Generation, Doctor Who... What was the name of the miniseries?
Assimilation Squared.
Assimilation Squared.
The bad guys were the Borg, along with the Cybermen, which are the Doctor Who versions of the Borg.
Which actually came first.
Yeah.
So as Star Trek fans, we have to give Doctor Who credit for inventing the Borg.
Yeah, pretty much.
They actually said in like one of the old Second Doctor episodes with the Cybermen, a Cyberman actually says resistance is futile.
Yeah. So. But in fairness, after the Borg were invented, after the Borg episodes, Doctor Who started adding attributes of the Borg
to the Cybermen.
Yeah, so it went back and forth. Yeah,
the Borg are way cooler.
Well, they were the Giger version of the Cybermen.
Yeah.
You know, the HR Giger.
But they're the coolest when you have Borg and Cybermen together.
Yeah,
you worked on. So
yeah, and the fun part of that story was we had an 8-issue miniseries, and these were the villains, and they're both about assimilation. And eventually, if you're going to assimilate, well, who's going to assimilate? Like, if they both assimilated the whole universe and it was just the two of them, it's never going to work. Somebody's going to take over somebody. And my solution to this, the writers had a solution, which I won't spoil the story, but my solution visually was the Borg started having Cybermen parts just slowly over the issues, and the Cybermen started having Borg parts like they were sharing parts, becoming almost the same entity.
Yeah, and it was really cool visuals.
That was a fun book to work on because first off, I got to go to Delta 4, which we hadn't seen that planet yet anywhere. The Deltans, for people that don't know, it's from the motion picture, Ilea.
The bald chick in the motion picture.
Yeah.
For you slackers who don't know what a Deltan is.
So I was like, what would Deltan 4 look like? And I just designed it to look like a well landscaped park, the whole planet, like everything was just paradise. And then I got to decimate it with a Borg Cybermen attack. And we also had fun. We did a flashback where we
yes.
Yeah,
I was going to bring that up.
Yeah. Now, I didn't draw that. We had somebody come in and do an 8-page insert where there was this was Matt Smith and Next Generation.
Yeah, it was 11th Doctor, Matt Smith, and TNG crew teamed up together. But there is a flashback to...
Issue 3, I think, or issue 4.
That sounds right.
Yeah, and there's a flashback where Matt Smith has like this weird flashback, and then we go back to Captain Kirk, the original series gang, and of course...
Tom Baker.
Best
doctor ever.
Yep, agreed. That's everybody's first doctor in America anyways, you know?
Yeah, it was really cool, like, retro artwork that, who did that, by the way?
I'm trying to remember. I knew you were going to ask me that.
Yeah, now I made you look like a jerk.
Yeah, jeez. Well, that was a long time ago. That was, like, almost 10 years ago now, I think.
Yeah, like 2009 or 10, maybe? I think it might have been more recent than that, but, getting to the recent stuff.
Yeah.
What came after the Doctor Who crossover?
Okay, so I think after that, was it City on the Edge of Forever? I think it was City on the Edge of Forever was directly. I mean, there was some little stuff in between that I did, but I think the next big crossover was Harlan Ellison's original script for City on the Edge of Forever.
So I actually have not read that yet. Okay. I bought it, just haven't gotten around to reading it. I mean, I know what happens. I have to ask about Harlan Ellison. Did you have any interaction with him? Did he give you notes?
I had a lot of interaction with him, which scared the hell out of me at first.
I can imagine.
Yeah, we started when we started it. Okay, first thing I had to do. Scott Tipton, one of the writers, Scott and Dave Tipton, they adapted Harlan's screenplay for comic books.
Yeah,
so
just some backstory. Harlan Ellison wrote what is widely considered the greatest episode of Star Trek ever, City on the Edge of Forever, and he was very disappointed with some changes they made with how the episode ended.
Yeah.
And so basically,
not just the ending. There was a lot of writes and rewrites, and there was also a lot of slander back and forth. And it just depends on who you believe. Mm-hmm. You know, what's going on. He actually wrote a book about this where he has the original screenplay, and then he has a bunch of faxes and stuff to back up his side of the story.
Yeah, he's never let this go. With 50 years, and he's still.
He actually, for a brief period, let it go, and then Roddenberry did something that pissed him off, and then it started all over again. But yeah, it's been kind of stuck in his craw, and that's kind of what made doing this miniseries so special, because we're actually going to show the episode as it would have appeared if we kept his script, which was kind of important to him. And but like I was saying, when we started, I had to meet him, and have you ever seen the documentary Dreams with Sharp Teeth? The Harlan Ellison? Was it? Yeah. He's an angry guy, and he makes people cry, and they run out, and it's just like, it was scary to meet him. So Scott Tipton, who's doing the script, owns a store in North Hollywood called Blast Off Comics, and Harlan was doing a signing there, and Chris Ryall, who was the editor on the book, told me, "You got to go meet him." I'm like, "I don't want to meet him," but okay. But at the same time, I'm a huge fan of his since I was a kid. I saw Boy and His Dog at a drive-in theater in 1977 when I was 7 years old.
Great writer. Like,
brilliant.
No one can deny that.
Brilliant. I was excited to meet him, but I was scared. Because I had 2 pages of art, and he hadn't seen them yet, so I'm supposed to bring the art and stand in front of him and have him look at it.
Yeah.
So I stood in the back room and just was doing shots of whiskey until I had the liquid courage to go out there. And then I go out there and I show him the artwork, and he doesn't even look at the artwork. He goes, "You have stupid shorts," or something like that. Like he was like making fun of my wardrobe, and I'm like, "Oh, this isn't gonna go well." But he loved the art, and then we actually became friends. We actually had contact a lot, and he became like the guy I most wanted to hang out with, the guy I was most afraid of. And he's actually as expressive with his praise as he is with his insults, but you don't always see that.
Yeah, that's not what people report or post around on the internet.
Well, that's no fun. And then we did the series, and he was involved a lot, and like I actually had his number on my phone, so I can just call him anytime I wanted to like have a question or what were you thinking this, because I really wanted this to be his image as much as possible. I wanted it to look like what he thought it was supposed to look like. And there was a lot of restrictions to that, too, because I wanted it to look like the actual episode. I wanted this to be an episode that would have aired. So I wanted to do all these grand helicopter shots and Lord of the Rings things when they're walking on the planet, but you really can't do that because that wouldn't have been in the budget.
Yeah, you lose the TOS.
Yeah, and I wanted it to be authentic. So I wanted the small scenes and make it feel like an episode. But I did do, like, there was if you look at it, there is this one part where they first beam down on the planet where the Guardians Forever are, where I did this big helicopter shot and Lord of the Rings scene. But one page, that's it. But I had to kind of hold back on all that stuff so it would feel like a real episode.
So, for people who don't know, Harlan Ellison actually appears in this comic. So, what was that like painting him?
Oh, it was great. I mean,
did he model for you?
Yeah, it's the character,
like a French girl on Titanic.
He said, "Draw me like your French girls." You asshole. I think you probably know this. My wife's off camera. But it was we went out to dinner with him, and then we got back, and he was telling me the story how was it Trooper, I think was the character's name, and it was like this homeless guy with no legs on like I forget what movie, like Eddie Murphy on that movie. Trading Places. Yeah. He was on a little like roller thing, and except for real. And he said he wrote that character for himself. He always wanted to play that character. And when he told me that story, we went back to his place, and I said, "Can I take some like photo reference shots of you?" And we went through the script, and I'm like, "Okay, do this panel." And I just like took a bunch of shots from different angles so that I could actually put him in there. And I don't know if this is true, but Chris Ryall told me he had a tear in his eye when he first saw the page.
Oh,
so
wow.
that was awesome. Yeah.
Was that like a career highlight for you? Like
actually meeting him and
talking. Harlan Ellison cry. This guy who's known for being a mean, scary asshole. Like,
yeah, but I mean, he does have a real side to him. He just the grisly guy you see in the documentaries or you see at signings that's just a side of him. I mean, he's like everybody. He's a much more conventional person once you get past that. He's just had a really rough time trying to keep his image the way he wants it, and that's important to him as an artist more than it is making money or more than it is being successful. So I think people see a side of him that isn't necessarily him. He also has a great sense of humor. He's a nice guy. You know, he's a nice guy that can turn on a dime. I'll say that.
That's probably like part of his. I don't want to say shtick, but that's part of like he knows like that's part of like his presence. Like,
yeah, I mean, you do see a lot more of that Harlan at signings, and my feeling is it's either because it's just become what people expected, and he knows that's what they're looking for, and he's putting that on. Or it also might be that signings just frustrate the hell out of me. So.
I can imagine that's a very frustrating thing to go through day in and day out for decades.
Probably, yeah. Well, especially since he was so vocal about how he felt about Gene and how he felt about Star Trek and what his experience was. As a Star Trek fan, and I feel it sometimes too, that's going to piss us off.
Yeah.
So he's got a lot of pissed off Star Trek fans kind of... doing a live version of Internet Troll on him, So a lot of his kind of flip outs some of them are justified. Some of them are like, just leave me alone, And some of them I think are theater, to be honest. But I couldn't say, I don't know him well enough to know that. I just say I do know another side of him. And to illustrate the point, when I first met him, that scary moment I was just telling you about where he made fun of my clothes and everything, but loved the art. We went to dinner afterwards, and he was as vocal about how much he loved the lobster bisque, made the chef come out, told everybody about it, wanted to make a big deal out of it. So he's, like I said, when I say he's just as vocal with his praise as he is about his criticism.
That's really cool. Yeah, that's like I said, that's not something that gets talked about a lot. So
yeah. Well, I mean, if you filmed that and put it in a documentary, it'd be like, oh, who cares? You like the lobster bisque. Yeah.
So after working on City on the Edge of Forever, then came the recent project, right? The Mirror Broken.
Yes. Yeah.
So we've actually, me and Dave, my co-host, we've recorded a review of that. I wanted to get that posted before I came on this cruise, but I'm having some technical issues. I got to fix it when I get home. So I guess the review might come before or after this. I'll figure that out later. I didn't know I was going to run into the artist. Tell us about that.
Well, it all started with when I'm not doing comics, I'm working for CBS Paramount. I'm doing Star Trek art a lot. And it started with a style guide that CBS wanted to do for for some of the consumer products, based on Mirror Universe. So I wanted to do a bunch of Mirror Universe stuff, and with all the way across TOS, TNG, DS9, Voyager, and Enterprise. The problem was there was no Mirror Universe for TNG except for some novels that didn't quite fit in with the continuity that Deep Space Nine established and that continued with Enterprise. So they figured we'll start from the ground up and we'll just do a new TNG that isn't based on the novels, that's just based on the TV continuity, and so draw it, And so I did a bunch of sketches of different uniforms, different ideas, dealing with what I felt was kind of fascist fashion statements, so like high leather boots. I kind of based a lot on the Italian fascists, World War II, and the Nazis, of course.
Fascism very stylish right now in the world.
Well, they can dress, yeah. But yeah, and actually, it's funny you say that now in the world, because I was like, this is going to be a great story, because to me, the story was Spock was a reformer based on what we saw in Mirror, the end of that. Yet in Deep Space Nine, they said his reforms weakened the Empire and now they're destroyed, and I never felt comfortable with that. I don't think reform weakens anybody. I think it can only help. So my answer to that was, well, obviously Spock did his reforms and somebody came in and trashed everything he ever did, ripped up all his reforms, and came in with an authoritarian type thing. I don't know if any of this sounds familiar, with an authoritarian kind of. So
make the Terran Empire great again.
And to me, the best Trek stories are ones that are analogous to what's happening in real life. Whatever side of the politics you're on, this is what's happening. There is a major shift in the way we're governing, and the way we look at things, and the way things are socially, and the divide. And I wanted to talk about all of that with the Mirror Universe. And so my idea was, recently that all changed, and the whole Spock reform changed that they were talking about. And I say our story is around maybe the 5th season of TNG, and it leads to what DS9 was talking about.
I'm glad you clarified that, because that was one thing we were trying to figure out, was when that took place, if that was concurrent with the Deep Space Nine Mirror Universe episodes, if it was before or what.
I would say I would say at least a couple years before, but it's around that time. But here's the thing: what's happening in DS9 and what Kira says, or the intended says to the Terran slaves.
Which, to clarify, what she says is that the Terran Empire is fallen. It's
gone. Yeah, and they're all worthless slaves, and Terrans have no souls, and and all the things that they're doing to the prisoners there is what was done to prisoners of war in World War II. I mean, they were told, the prisoners of war in Japan were told that America is burning, it's gone, you lost. Get used to your life here, it's never going to change. And that's what happens. I'm sure we do it too to prisoners of war, because you want to break their spirit. So my thought was, maybe the Terran Empire isn't that weak. They're on the very far. Deep Space Nine's way out there in the wilderness. So yeah, the Terran Empire at the very least at least has their solar system, and that's kind of what we did with the series was they are restricted mostly to their solar system, and they're trying to rebuild. And we started there. So they're not all starving, but they're not strong, but they still have starships, so it could be fun.
And that was your idea?
Well, my idea was sort of the allegory about the fascism, so I created the look of the characters to kind of have the high boots and kind of invoke a fascism. Also, I wanted to invoke a kind of strength, and I wanted to get back to my comic book roots of muscly people fighting. So I gave them sleeveless shirts and,
You didn't go all like Ed McGuinness and stuff, like muscles on top of muscles.
No, like real people muscles. Because the thing is with comic books is everybody, no matter what their body's doing, it's constantly flexed.
You didn't do like the Rob Liefeld, like give like Picard like giant muscles.
No. No. I like to draw like real physiology, especially when you're drawing real likenesses, because it would look weird if they were, But everybody's a little bulked up. I mean, Patrick Stewart actually has some big guns.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't really exaggerate him that much, but I did the same with Data. My idea with Data, when I created the look of the characters, there's two things you want to do in the Mirror Universe. You want to get these characters, you want to give them either a goatee or an eye patch, or both. Because that's Mirror Universe, or a scar. And I'm trying to think of creative ways to give people eye patches, and Data, I was like, oh, Borg. So I put the Borg eye on him, like, what's that about? And then I came up with an idea that, well, if Data in this universe is trying to be as human as possible, the lessons he learns from humanity would be to be a better weapon, to be a better fighter, to be a better soldier, to get more, you know. So he would probably, if he had the opportunity, reprogram some nanites and incorporate Borg parts to be a stronger soldier. And then I figured, well, how would he do that? And I figured, well, the Borg wouldn't be as much of a threat in this universe because if you look at Borg, morality always held them back from defeating the Borg. Mm-hmm. You know, should we do this? Mirror Universe, they wouldn't ask those questions. They wouldn't be hindered at all. They had a way to wipe them out. They would wipe them out. And if Data wants to play with some of their toys, he would. And so that's what Data became.
And I like the idea in the comic that was written in there was that Data was kind of like, you know, modifying himself, and it almost sounded like instead of trying to become more human, this Data was doing the opposite. He was trying to become like more machine.
Well, yeah. What was happening was in his attempt to be more human, or what he thought humanity was, he was doing the opposite. And Picard has this really kind of cool conversation with him. That they came up with a scene where they're like, he's basically saying, Data, be more imaginative. You know, putting laser beams on your arm isn't what's going to make you a more efficient weapon. You gotta think, and that kind of changes him a little bit. But there was a track that he was on, presumably before you start reading the comic books, that brought him to that point, and they explained it a little bit in the Luke Grade special,
which I didn't get to read, but I'm hoping that is in the trade.
I would think it would be. If it's allowed. I'm not sure what the licensing is there, but because it had to be a Loot Crate exclusive. But basically it's the story of how Picard and Data met. And it's an important story. Yeah. It kind of really informs what's happening in the 5 issues.
They hinted that in the main part of the series was that it was involved the Soong android slave mines or something along that.
Yeah. They get right into that. But I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen it.
Don't spoil it for me. I haven't read that issue yet. I've read everything else though.
Data dies in the end.
Oh no. How did the solicitations get to the point where they were saying there would be 6 issues initially after the free comic book day one, and then somehow it became 5 issues?
I think that was just a miscommunication or a snafu or something. I'm not sure. I know when we started, we thought there were going to be 6 issues. Mm-hmm. And then somewhere around halfway through the first issue, like, no, it's just going to be 5. So I think it was a typo, or I'm not sure what it was. But it was never meant to be 6 issues. Okay. It was always meant to be 5.
Well, it's kind of 6 anyways, because you have the free comic book day issue.
That might have been why it happened. I'm not sure. Yeah, because issue 0, what we call the free comic book day one, which was a 12-page.
Okay. I have to eat some crow because I should say this is before I met you.
Yeah.
Speculating when we were recording our review, I put out a theory that maybe it's gorgeous painted artwork. I know that might take a long time. Maybe the artist is getting behind and they decided to wrap things up quicker, but.
What? Oh, you mean with
like, I didn't know if there was some reason like maybe it was again. I didn't know
you mean why there wasn't a 6?
Maybe it's taking them too long to paint 6 issues, which happens in comics sometimes.
Well, I mean,
in my defense.
That was an issue because originally I was supposed to have more time. It started off as a painted comic with issue 0 and issue 1. But in issue 2, I went into an ink wash, and not everybody noticed. But I did a black and white ink wash, which was much faster. And then we had a colorist just colorize it the way they kind of colorize old movies.
Yeah, we taught that.
Yeah.
My co-host Dave is a big art nerd.
Yeah.
And he manages a comic book shop, and he actually did point that out. That it looks like they're working a little quicker. So
it was quicker, but I think it was the same kind of attention to realism, but it was just done in ink.
Yeah.
And then somebody else colorized it.
No, it still looks great.
Yeah. But it was the compromise we had to make so it wasn't jarring. Because if I had gone to like a pen and ink style with doing line work or something with digital colors, that would have looked kind of weird. So I went with an ink wash, so it still had those kind of shading and kind of lighting that I wanted. And it was like almost twice as fast. So
How long does it take you to normally finish on your end? If someone else is doing the coloring, like how long does it take to do one issue?
Well, fully painted stuff, like the issue 0 and issue 1, that's like 30 hours a page. I'll need like 6 weeks of working 100-hour work weeks to get that done. And originally that's the kind of time I thought I would have, and then the deadlines changed and I had to go to almost a monthly schedule. And the ink wash I would do in like 5 weeks. And what would happen is I would do the one page, upload it, and while I'm working on the next page, the colorist would be working on that. And we kind of had a system down where it made it much faster.
Yeah, and it's actually pretty quick. You have a lot of guys in the industry that fall behind just doing more basic stuff with pencils and.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's hard work, especially working from scripts. Back in the day, the Marvel style scripts where the pencilers could just kind of. What do you want to accomplish? I'll figure it out.
Yeah, Jack Kirby was doing like 100 pages a month.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was because they were designing their pages. They didn't get like the full script of draw 20 people in this 9-panel grid. But it's changed a lot where the writers are kind of controlling the kind of the layouts, and also the expectation is to be much more realistic, much more on the nose, much more detailed. I mean, I saw a meme online where they were like 1970. And then or 1977 and 2017, and they showed Captain America's boot, which was just a few simple lines with the piratey flair, and then the next one was a fully detailed Doc Martin with all the wrinkles and the laces
and buckles. And I would assume working on a licensed project like the Star Trek comics, you're not given as much freedom on every design has to be approved by CBS. Did you feel like you had a lot of input on...
With Mirror Universe, I had a great deal of input.
Because you'd never been on screen before.
Yeah, everything. I mean, I was designing it, so everything had to be approved. But I got to come up with the designs, and they would kind of improve them, or they would give some notes, But I mean, I can actually, if you want to accompany this with a bunch of sketches, I can email it to you if you want.
That'd be awesome.
I did a bunch of original sketches, and you should see some of the uniforms. I mean, some of them were just plain wacky, but you're just like scribbling ideas out there and trying to get it all out. And then they look at it, and then we have a meeting, and we talk about it, and I go back to the drawing board and do some more. So in that way, it was a very creative process, but ultimately it all has to be approved. But they let you figure it out, which is kind of fun.
And I noticed one of the things that I pointed out when we were reviewing the episode was a lot of the starships and stuff. They're all like actual designs. The Cardassian ships, and then a lot of the Federation ships. I think there might have been like an Akira class in there somewhere.
There was an Ambassador class. There were,
the Ambassador.
The Ambassador class.
Which is my favorite Enterprise. Is the Enterprise C. I love that design.
Yeah, it's funny because it was described as an Ambassador class, and when I drew it. My first impulse was to draw the next-gen Ambassador class, which had different nacelles, but I went right to Enterprise C, which had the nice round, kind of retro-looking nacelles. Also, the Enterprise in the Mirror Universe is all good things.
All good
Enterprise.
things.
Yeah. And that was John Van Sitters, the president of CBS, that came up with that. He was like, he had the model there, and we were at a meeting, and he plopped it on the table. That's your Enterprise.
The Eagle Moss.
Yeah. And he said, that's your Enterprise. And he's like, you can take that home. So I was like, okay. So I made the gun, the cannon on the bottom look a little meaner. And a lot of the weapons, I put some Klingon technology in it, just because in theory, I figured they, like the Klingons, they would conquer places and then take their technology and apply it to their own. So I try to put some Romulan stuff in there. It's really subtle. And I bumped up the guns on top a little bit, and of course put the really cool wing dagger thing. The yellow.
The Mirror Universe NX-01. They had that.
Yeah, and of course the Empire logos on all the nacelles. The sword with the world through it.
Yeah, I was wondering who came up with that. Was that like a Matt Jeffries design, or was there someone else working on TOS who would have painted that on the doors?
When I did the Back to the Style Guide before the comic came out, I worked with I can't remember the name of the design firm or the guy worked with. There were two people I worked with, a man and a woman, and they did most of the design work to it, and I did most of the illustrations. And they came up with, again, like I was talking about my sketches, they came up with like a million different designs, and we went through them and went, oh, this is cool, or I like this part of this one. And so they came up with it, and I'm ashamed to say I can't remember the name of these people, but I will add that to your thing. You can put it on the website with the sketches if you want. But because they deserve credit, because they came up with that, and it's freaking brilliant. Oh, I can say fucking brilliant.
Yeah, fucking brilliant. It is. And speaking of fucking brilliant, just if we could talk about your designs of the characters themselves, like the personality. We talked about Data for a little bit. I noticed your beard really reminds me of how you draw, or how you paint Mirror Universe Riker.
Riker got this from me.
Yeah.
No, actually, I'm a big fan of Scandinavian Norwegian mythology.
Nice.
I'm a Vikaphile, I guess you. So I'm really into the Viking lore, and I thought, what would a warrior Riker look like? How can I give the guy famous for a beard more beard?
Yeah, you need to work on Thor. You need to get in touch with Marvel.
Oh, I would love to. I would love to, but I would take it in a whole new direction. And, like this isn't Viking lore. You got it all wrong, you know. Actually, but that's what Walt Simonson did, and it did really well.
It's the best Thor run ever.
Yeah. But yeah, that's where that came up with. And this beard I just recently grow, but I have a cleft chin. You can't see it with the beard, so my beard grows in two different directions anyways. So I just kind of spin it around like this.
That's how Viking you are, though.
Yeah,
like the chin is trying to split the beard.
Odin himself crafted this beard.
Well, I got my beard from being a young man watching The Next Generation, and then when I saw season 2, when Riker got a beard, my beard just came in instantly.
Yeah, it had no choice. Riker drew the beard out of you.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to share some insight with us, and if anyone hasn't read the Mirror Broken comic, I think it is the best thing that's come out the entire time IDW has had the Star Trek license. And I'm not just like saying that because I have the artist sitting next to me. I said that, and he actually paid me to say that. But no, it's actually a lot of fun, and I really hope that there might be a sequel to it one day. So just closing out, has there been any conversations about that? I know from my retail friends that it sold pretty well, at least the stores around Austin, Texas.
It actually sold very well, and I've never got more input from fans personally about it than anything I've worked on, even sitting on here forever, which I was surprised. Will there be a sequel? I don't know, we'll have to wait and see. How would I know?
All right, well, we're ending on a cliffhanger, a little bit of closure, but something that could be continued, not unlike issue 5 of Mirror Broken. So
and hey, keep waiting for issue 6. It's coming. Just like Chinese democracy, you might have to wait 10 years.
Oh dear. Well, we're going to go ahead and sign off. And I just want to tell everyone, until next time, live long and prosper, y'all.
Terran Empire!
Oh, that was certainly an insightful interview.
It was fair enough. He was a good man. Fatheree is weak, but good interview.
And you might have noticed that there was some discussion there about a possible sequel to this comic book miniseries.
Yes, I want to know more of it.
Well, I have information on that. As it turns out, the miniseries sequel has already been released in its entirety.
We should have a night of debauchery.
We will be talking about the sequel miniseries and the next installment of Tex-Trek. And until then, long live the Empire, y'all! Thank all of you so much for checking out this installment of Tex-Trek. I hope you enjoyed it. Please be sure to like our YouTube videos and subscribe to our channel. Audio-only version of episodes are available at our website, www.tex-trek.com. Please check out our site, especially if you just want an audio-only podcast. We have that available for you. Y'all can also keep up with us online. You can follow us on Twitter, @TXTrek. Or you can check us out on Facebook at www.facebook.com/tex-trek. Please, by all means, let us know what you think by dropping a comment anywhere you see fit. We definitely want to hear your feedback. Let us know what you liked and what you would like to see more of, what you would like to see differently going forward. If you want to email me directly, go ahead. I can be reached at fathereeactual@tex-trek.com. Thank all y'all again. Take care.